evening, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. This is my degree lecture recital presented in fulfillment of part of the requirements for the Master of Music degree. And tonight I'm going to be talking about a topic which has been a passion of mine for quite some time, and that is Polish art song. Tonight you will hear a sampling of some of the greatest works of Polish art song by some of the greatest Polish art song composers of the past more than 200 years. Also tonight, you will hear a through line through these songs, which is the poetry of Adam Mickiewicz. Adam Mickiewicz is often viewed as Poland's greatest poet. In order to understand the poetry of Adam Mickiewicz and the songs by the composers who were inspired by his texts, it's first important to learn about the history of the Polish nation since the time of Mickiewicz to the present. Adam Mickiewicz was born in 1798. Adam Mickiewicz was born in 1798, which was 3 years after the dissolution of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, also known as the First Polish Republic. The First Polish Republic was known as one of the most prosperous time periods in the history of Poland. And so, after its dissolution, that is when the second half of Polish history is considered to have begun, which stretches to the present. The partition of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was conducted by the Russian Empire, the Kingdom of Prussia, and the Habsburg monarchy of Austria. Most of the land which falls within present-day Poland ended up falling under the control of the Russian Empire. And during this time period, Poland was referred to as Congress Poland. In 1830, there was a failed uprising called the November Uprising, and this was a landmark cultural event for Poles of this era, which inspired poetry and music and lots of other art. It also led to a phenomenon called the Great Emigration, where many notable Polish people were forced to live outside of the Polish borders. In 1864, Poland was able to gain some autonomy from the Russian Empire, but did officially remain independent. And at this time is when we consider modern Polish society to have begun. In 1905, there was a 3-year-long revolution against the Russians, which started. After it, Poland's independent status was left in question. And it wasn't until 1919, after World War I, when Poland officially, finally, regained its independence for the first time since 1795, marking more than a century of Russian control. Poland's independence was negotiated into the Treaty of Versailles, and at this time is when the Second Polish Republic is considered to have begun. The Second Polish Republic stretched for only 20 years, ending in 1939 when Poland was invaded and occupied by Nazi Germany at the start of World War II. At this time, parts of the Second Polish Republic were also given to the control of the Soviet Union. After World War II, in 1945, Poland regained its independence with its current borders, but it was as a communist satellite state of the Soviet Union. And it wasn't until 1989 when democracy began again, and the Third Polish Republic, which exists to this day, began. This is a map of the history of the many border changes of the Polish nation. If you look at the area in pink, you will see the modern-day borders of the Republic of Poland. The large gold section, which stretches east of the pink area, is the boundary of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth at its height. Much of the land which the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth occupied is now in present-day countries such as, ostensibly, Lithuania, but also Belarus, Ukraine, Estonia, and Latvia. When the partition of Poland happened in 1795, Poland did not have definitive borders, but it's generally accepted that the overlap area between the gold area and the pink area was what was considered to be Polish land, whereas the rest was definitively Russian. At the time of the start of the Second Polish Republic, the gray area to the east of the pink area was given to Poland. on the left side of the map to the west that there's a boundary which says 1939, and so the borders of Poland were not as far west as they are today. After World War II, Poland's borders looked as they do today, but they were not democratic until 1989. Prior to the classical era, most Polish music was instrumental, and that which was vocal was usually sacred, and therefore it was in Latin. There is one notable exception to this, and that is a composition from 1588 by Krzysztof Klabon, his Songs of the Slavonic Calliope, which are a cycle of lute songs. This is commonly recognized as the earliest notable example of Polish language vocal music. However, this also signifies a big gap. 1588 was before the Baroque period, and it didn't become commonplace for Polish text to be set to music until the classical era, meaning there was a big gap of notable Polish vocal music being written in the Baroque era. The phenomenon which sparked the new trend of Polish text being set to music was the publication of Józef Elsner's treatise on the setting of Polish text to music, published in 1818. There were some Polish art songs being written in the lead up to this, but it did not become commonplace until this treatise was available. Józef Elsner, despite most of his own works, operas and art songs, being lost, is considered the forefather of Polish art song because of this treatise, which inspired so many Polish art songs in the decades and centuries to come, and that he was also the teacher of the first two significant Polish art song composers, those being Maria Szymanowska and Frederick Chopin, the first two composers you will hear tonight. So why was it that the Polish language was not set until well after so many of the other languages of Europe? Before we get into that, we have this wonderful quote by Józef Elsner: "The influence of music on poetry and of poetry on music is so important that one art form cannot be precisely and fully explained without reference to the other." And this is a sentiment which does permeate Polish art song, but I think even stretches beyond that, and can be used to reliably discuss art song as a whole, as a genre. Because that is what art song essentially is poetry set to music. And now, as for the difficulties of the Polish language and why it was not commonly set until Elsner's time, Polish is a Slavic language, specifically a West Slavic language, along with Czech and Slovak. It is a fixed stress language, meaning that stress is always on the same syllable of every word. In this case, the second to last syllable, and there is no exception to this. Something interesting about the Polish language is that in general, word order is not very significant to the meaning of a sentence. Words can be changed around in order. The order of words can be changed around, and the sentence will usually still make sense. There are conventional word orders. If you go to Poland and speak with a non-conventional word order, people may look at you funny, but they will understand you. And so this freedom to modify word order is something which has impacted Polish poetry as long as it has existed. From a singer's perspective, there are no phonemes of the Polish language which aren't also present in either English, Italian, French, or German. Also, there are strict pronunciation rules and very little exceptions to those rules, meaning if one can learn the rules of Polish pronunciation theoretically, you can theoretically understand the pronunciation of any Polish word, which is not always the case with other languages that singers commonly study. However, knowing in your mind how a word should theoretically be pronounced and actually getting it out of your mouth are very different. And the biggest reason why that is a challenge for the Polish language are the difficult consonant clusters. This is the defining characteristic of the Polish language. There are types of consonants which are placed back to back in Polish words, which are not placed back to back in almost any other language, let alone a Slavic language. Beyond that, fricatives and affricatives, which are sustainable consonants, have two distinct allophones, which means they have two different ways of being pronounced. In this case, for Polish, they have light allophones and heavy allophones. actually started to set Polish text to music, what does it mean for an art song to be a Polish art song? Well, the easy answer is that it has Polish language text, and that is a definitive answer. You can draw the line there. But what are the characteristics of those songs? The first that many think of, which is a characteristic not only of art song, but of Polish music as a whole, is a drawing of inspiration from Polish folk music. In particular, folk dances like the mazurka, the krakowiak, and the kujawiak, as well as many others. And this is something we hear in the piano music of Chopin, for example, which is perhaps the thing that we most think of first when we think of Polish music. In the early 1900s, Poland became a hub of total exploration and free atonality, which ran parallel to the Second Viennese School. And composers such as Karol Szymanowski and Grażyna Bacewicz led to more avant-garde composers such as Krzysztof Penderecki. Because Poland is a country which has had a history of inconsistent borders and oppression from other outside forces, there is lots of German and Russian influence in their music, particularly during periods where either or both of these countries were occupying the land which we now know as Poland. Also, because of the prominence of Frédéric Chopin, who himself was half French, and the desire of composers who came after him to imitate his style and live up to his great name, there is a significant French influence in Polish music, which may not have been there were it not for Chopin's prominence. In my opinion, the most important thing which defines Polish art song is a desire of composers to seek out and set texts which have the underlying theme of resistance in the face of oppression. And that is the theme which most commonly defines the poetry of Adam Mickiewicz. Adam Mickiewicz, as I mentioned earlier, born 3 years after the fall of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, lived his entire life as officially a Russian citizen. There was no independent Poland during his lifetime. He is the principal figure of the Polish Romantic poetry movement, and he is commonly viewed as Poland's greatest ever poet. The Polish Romantic movement was headed by the 3 poets we now view as the 3 national bards of Poland, the others being Juliusz Słowacki and Zygmunt Krasiński. Mickiewicz is the best known and most celebrated of those 3. While he has several regular-length poems, he is best known for his epic poems. Particularly, Pan Tadeusz is the national epic of Poland and required reading for all Polish high school students. Beyond his national influence in the nation of Poland, Adam Mickiewicz is one of the most influential writers who has hailed from anywhere in the Slavic world. He is the only Polish poet who is regularly set by non-Polish composers. And such composers who have set text by Mickiewicz, usually in translation to German or Russian, include Karl Löwe, Piotr Tchaikovsky, and Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov. Adam Mickiewicz was an ardent Polish nationalist and a supporter of independence from the Russian Empire. And it was this sentiment which got him into trouble in college when he and his fellow Polish nationalist friends started a secret society called the Philomats. When this was discovered by the Russian Empire, Mickiewicz was sent into exile in central Russia because of his so-called radical beliefs, at least in the view of the Russian Empire. Eventually, after being forced to live in central Russia for some time, he was allowed to live in Moscow. And at this time, he was able to mingle with the artistic and literary elite who lived in Moscow during this time, most notably Alexander Pushkin. He is one of the key figures of the aforementioned Great Emigration, which again is the phenomenon of significant Poles who were forced to live outside of the boundaries of what would be considered now Poland. He traveled around Europe quite a bit, and he eventually settled in France. While he was living in France, he served as an informal diplomat for the French government, this despite never being granted French citizenship by that government. The country of France sent him on a diplomatic mission to Istanbul, where he contracted cholera and died in 1855. Adam Mickiewicz still to this day is inspiring writers, composers of Polish art song. But the first one ever to set, as far as we know, a text by Adam Mickiewicz was Maria Szymanowska. Maria Szymanowska was a trailblazing virtuoso pianist. She was also a salon music composer, meaning she composed usually piano works and songs for voice. She's notable for being one of the first pianists to perform memorized, which is something that other notable virtuoso pianists, such as Franz Liszt and Clara Schumann, eventually did later in that decade. She was also, regardless of being memorized or not, one of the very first notable professional traveling virtuoso pianists of the 1800s. She met Adam Mickiewicz when he was allowed to come to Moscow after his exile, and in addition to meeting her, Mickiewicz met her daughter, Celina Szymanowska. Celina and Adam Mickiewicz married in 1834 in Paris, and so Maria Szymanowska became Adam Mickiewicz's mother-in-law. Maria Szymanowska is most known for her piano works to this day, but she also has several songs, mostly in Polish and French, and one in Italian. Nowadays, she is recognized near unanimously as the greatest pre-Chopin Polish composer of the Common Practice period. The Szymanowska song, which will be featured on this recital, is Świteżanka. This is the only song you will hear tonight, which does not set a short poem by Adam Mickiewicz, but rather an excerpt from one of his epic poems. This particular epic poem is a legendary tale about a water nymph who lives in the deep waters of Lake Świtez, which is a real lake in modern-day Belarus. She has the ability to turn into a human and attract young men from the forest, who will eventually come into the lake and drown. The full epic poem is much longer, but Szymanowska only set the first 6 stanzas. I, for one, am glad that she did. The Mickiewicz poem has the same rhythmic meter throughout, so one could theoretically take the verses of the Szymanowska song and turn it from a 3-verse or 3-strophe song into an 18-strophe song, and it would be a 28-minute performance. And so I bet we're all glad that Szymanowska chose to set the first 6 stanzas as 3 verses. The music is quite Schubertian in style. It is strophic, which is very Schubertian, and also the piano accompaniment is choral, mostly throughout. This is the type of song that would be appropriate for a singer of almost any age, besides the difficulty of needing to memorize strophic Polish. This is Świteżanka. Jakiś to chłopiec piękny mówi, jaka to obok dziewica, brzegami siny świtasz i woli, idą przy świeże księżyca. Ona mu zboża daje maliny, a on jej kwiatki do wianka. Pewnie kochankiem jest tej dziewczyny, hero, an icon. Even the airport in Warsaw, is named after him. He is, of course, mostly known as a piano music composer, just like Maria Szymanowska, but throughout his lifetime, he wrote over 30 songs. This was inspired by his teacher, the aforementioned Józef Elsner, who also taught Maria Szymanowska. Although he wrote over 30 songs, only 19 of them still exist to this day. 17 of those songs were compiled after his death by his good friend Julian Fontana into his 74th and final opus. I had the pleasure of performing the full 74th opus this summer. Chopin only ever wrote songs in the Polish language, which I find interesting because he was half French, he was fluent in French, and he lived in France for most of his later life. There's no confirmation of this, but I believe that he felt a strong tie to his homeland during a period where he was not able to live there. And so he would refuse to write songs in any language other than Polish. Chopin did not know Adam Mickiewicz very well, but they were friendly acquaintances. When Mickiewicz was sick in 1847, Chopin came to his apartment and played some of his piano music to soothe him. Of course, Chopin ended up dying 6 years before Mickiewicz. The song of Chopin that you will hear tonight is Moja Pieszczotka. Mickiewicz's poem is a strange outlier among his works because it is erotic and overtly romantic. But it is also one of Mickiewicz's most commonly set poems by Polish art song composers. Chopin's rendition of the song was written in 1837, and it was ordered 12th in his 74th opus by Julian Fontana. You will hear the influence of Polish folk music in this song because the entire song is structured as a mazurka. And it also has strong resemblance to Chopin's later piano works due to its chromaticism. It's one of the most vocally compelling of Chopin's songs. A majority of Chopin's songs are strophic. This is one of the few that isn't, although it is a modified strophic. It's lyrical, and it fully embodies the romantic meaning of the text. This is a song which is good for a wide variety of singers who can handle the biggest pedagogical challenge, which is a major ninth jump up to a high A flat. This is Moja Pieszczotka. Chopin and Szymanowska preceded him in time, both of them were primarily known for their piano works. Stanisław Moniuszko has the distinction of being the first Polish composer who is mostly known for his vocal works. He is recognized as the father of Polish national opera, and the most common Polish operas performed to this day are by him. He also wrote over 300 songs, which is a significant increase from the composers you just heard. Many of his songs are organized into 12 songbooks. Each songbook is titled Śpiewnik domowy, number 1, 2, 3, etc. And Śpiewnik domowy translates to songbook from home. Moniuszko, like the composers who preceded him, uses Polish nationalist texts and Polish folk elements in his music, but he's also known for an operatic influence in some of his art songs. Most of his songs are most suited for a lower voice, either a mezzo or a baritone, but that is not exclusive. The song we'll hear tonight is Rozmowa. This is a passionate love poem that has an underlying theme of anxiety. There is presumably a lover's quarrel going on, and one person is saying, "I'm telling you that I love you, why isn't that enough for you?" And the other person wants more detail, more feeling, more passion. And the person who sings this piece or reads this poem is saying, "Shouldn't my love just be enough? Why do I have to say any more?" Moniuszko was so inspired by this text that he said it 2 different times. This is the second and more famous one. This is also the one in which you will hear more of his operatic influence, whereas the first one used more Polish folk influence. This song is in Moniuszko's 11th songbook, and it is the 9th song in that book. It is dramatic. It sounds as if it could belong as an operatic aria, and this is different than the majority of his other songs. This song is intended for a baritone, and the tessitura is most appropriate for one. However, there is a high G at the end of the piece, which makes it a significant challenge, and also does mean that some tenors will sing this piece. It is not common to hear sopranos or mezzo-sopranos sing this piece, but it is possible as well. I feel that it's important for you all to be exposed to a wide variety of Polish art song beyond just that which is appropriate for my own voice, and so I have asked some of my wonderful grad student voice colleagues to join me on this recital and perform some of these songs. And so, performing Rozmowa, we will have Ben Morrison. lesser-known composer who is relatively unperformed compared to the previous composers, but he is significant for his large Polish art song output. His style is similar to that of Moniuszko, but the significant difference between them is that Żeleński came later and based his style on earlier works, whereas Moniuszko came earlier and looked ahead. One of Żeleński's most well-known works is his opera Konrad Wallenrod, which is based on the epic poem by Mickiewicz of the same name. And because he is a late Romantic composer, whose works are composed in an early Romantic style, we view him as a neo-Romantic. The song we'll hear tonight is Słowiczku mój. This is Żeleński's most famous song, and also the most famous setting of this Mickiewicz poem. This poem is a rare example of a reference to religion in Mickiewicz's works. He uses an allegory of the birth of Jesus, representing the hope for a rebirth of the nation of Poland. This is the second song of Żeleński's two songs by Adam Mickiewicz. In order to perform this song, one must have a strong sense of internal rhythm due to the constant arpeggiation in the right hand of the piano. This song is a popular choice for sopranos because of its high tessitura and its very beautiful, lyrical, singable melody. This song is most commonly performed by lighter sopranos, but I personally prefer hearing it in a fuller voice. And so I have asked my dear friend, the wonderful full lyric soprano, Emma Arachtingi, to perform Słowiczku mój. Paderewski was a significant composer, but he is also known for being a diplomat and politician. In fact, he was Poland's representative at the negotiation and signing of the Treaty of Versailles, which eventually gave Poland its independence and started the Second Polish Republic. Later that same year, in 1919, he served as Poland's third prime minister for less than a year, However, he is still revered in Poland for his ability to negotiate its independence after over a century of Russian occupation. Paderewski had a strong relationship with the US President Woodrow Wilson, and he lived in the United States for quite some time. In fact, he composed Manru, which to this day is the only Polish opera ever to have been performed at the Metropolitan Opera in New York. And his musical style is consistent with the transition out of the Romantic era. The song we'll hear tonight is Nad wodą jedną. Paderewski's Sześć Pieśni, Opus 18, is a collection of 6 songs, all with text by Mickiewicz, and this is the 4th song. That opus was composed in 1893, which is considered to be before the end of the Romantic era, but it is definitely late Romantic. This is perhaps my favorite Adam Mickiewicz poem. It is an observation of a landscape, but it is not a direct one. It's through the reflection of a clear, glassy lake at nighttime. And it's used as an allegory that the impermanence of the images in the lake mirrors the impermanence of the human experience. I have no doubt in my mind that when writing this, Mickiewicz was inspired by the impermanence of his homeland. Paderewski's musical setting has 3 distinct sections. The first one is volatile and fast-moving. The middle section, calm and still. And then at the end, the fast, volatile section returns. Like the last piece, this piece requires a singer with a strong sense of internal pulse because of the constant triplets in the bass of the left hand of the piano, which can cause some difficult entrances. This is Nad wodą jedną.
Thank you.
And we do have a little bit of a gap on our timeline. We've already discussed Chopin and Moniuszko. Those are the first two people considered to be the three most important Polish composers. And the third is Karol Szymanowski, who never set any texts by Adam Mickiewicz, so he is absent tonight. Grażyna Bacewicz is perhaps the next most influential composer who followed in Szymanowski's style. She was also just the second Polish female composer after Maria Szymanowska to gain recognition outside of Poland. As mentioned, she was influenced by Karol Szymanowski's style, which is characterized by expanding of tonality, experimentation with atonality, and exotic impressionism, influences from the Middle East and East Asia. During a time period when all of Europe was flocking to study with Nadia Boulanger, she was no exception. She studied with her in Paris. She was a violinist herself, and she is most known for her instrumental works, but she also wrote plenty of songs. The song you will hear tonight is Dzwon I Dzwonki. This is a very quirky Mickiewicz poem. It characterizes a group of small bells up high in a church tower, and a large, cracked, broken bell lying in the sand underneath the church. And these bells speak to each other, and the little bells gloat that they are still working and able to sing. And the large bell laments his fate. Bacewicz's song was composed in 1955 and has two distinct sections, each of which characterize the two different types of bells. The first one being light and high and jingly, and the second one slow and somber and lower in the voice. The first section is faster, it's almost completely atonal, and the voice has the unique challenge of having to sing in 6/8 while the piano is playing in 4/8. The second section is more traditional. It does sit in G minor, and the meters changes to a consistent 4/4. This is a significant musical challenge, not in the least just because it's in Polish, but because of the atonality and the inconsistent meter. And so we have the wonderfully adept soprano, Allie Brault, to perform Dzwon I Dzwonki.
So
studying Polish art song for quite some time, but it is only recently that I have begun to familiarize myself with the Polish composers who are composing art song today, in this century. And I knew that I wanted to educate myself on that. And so when I set out with this lecture recital, I wanted to find a Polish art song by a living composer. And so I stumbled upon the song compilation project entitled Mickiewicz by the composer Witosława Frankowska, which is a series of recordings of art songs by various composers throughout history with text by Adam Mickiewicz. And it features several songs by living Polish composers. And so I listened to them, and when I heard Polawi Łzy by Anna Wrocławska-Musiałczyk, I knew that it was the song that I needed to have on my lecture recital. And so I messaged Anna, and she was very gracious in sending me the music and agreeing to allow me to perform her song in my recital, which will be the first performance of this song in the United States. Anna Wrocławska-Musiałczyk is a graduate of the Stanisław Moniuszko Academy of Music, a name we heard earlier. That's in Gdansk, which is in the very most northwestern part of Poland, and she has degrees in piano performance, choral conducting, and composition. She primarily composes choral music, and she's a member of the vocal ensemble Art and Voices. She defines her own style as being inspired by folk music. Particularly, she is inspired by folk music from the Kashubian region of Poland, which is that northwestern region where Gdansk is. She has a very impressive resume, and she's won many national and international competitions. Polawi Łzy is the shortest poem by Mickiewicz that is featured tonight. It is only 5 lines long, and the first and last lines are the same. But despite that, it is one of his most visceral poems, and one of the poems which I think most clearly defines the style of Mickiewicz. And it most clearly defines the anguish felt by the Polish people during oppression by the Russian Empire, particularly after the failed November uprising. Despite this being the shortest poem, this is the longest song you will hear tonight. The words Polawi Łzy are repeated a total of 28 times throughout the song in various musical contexts. This was composed in 2021, and as I mentioned earlier, it is part of the song compilation project Mickiewicz. This song was originally written for a mezzo-soprano, but there is a lack of extremity at the high and low parts of the range, which make it approachable for most singers. In my opinion, this song is composed in a way which makes it feel as though it is a dramatic recitation of a poem that just so happens to have some notes associated with it, rather than a type of song that requires a certain type of singer. And so I'm delighted to perform for you tonight, as our closer, Polawi Łzy. Spivey, Professor Jennifer Trost, and Dr. Chuck Yeomans for all their help and support. The biggest thanks to the wonderful Ann Deighton for taking on and of course, thank you to my wonderful singing collaborators, Allie Brault, Emma Arachtingi, and Ben Morrison, for being willing also to take on some very challenging music and a very challenging new language. None of them had ever sung in Polish before tonight. And of course, thank you to Anna Otsławska-Musiałczyk for sending me the music to the song you just heard. It was a delight to perform your piece. That's all. Thank you so much.